Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that's right at the very core of Bitcoin's DNA, the halving. It's this pre-programmed event that makes Bitcoin fundamentally scarce, and it happens just like clockwork. So let's get right into it.
So let me just start by asking a question. What is the one single event that literally hard codes scarcity directly into Bitcoin's programming? You probably guessed it, it's the halving. And honestly, if you understand this one thing, you're most of the way to understanding Bitcoin's whole economic model.
All right, so first up, let's just break down what this event actually is. When you strip it all down, the halving is basically a programmed, completely automatic cut in the supply of new Bitcoin.
Okay, so here's the deal. To keep the Bitcoin network secure, you have people called miners who use these super powerful computers to validate all the transactions. When they succeed, they bundle them into what's called a block. For doing all that hard work, they get a reward in new Bitcoin. The halving's only job is to cut that reward right in half, every time.
And, the direct result of cutting that reward is pretty simple. Fewer new Bitcoin are created with every new block that gets added to the chain. And that's really the main takeaway here. The whole point of the halving is to slow down the creation of new Bitcoin over time.
So how does this actually happen? Well, it is not random at all. In fact, it's designed to run like a perfect piece of clockwork. Let's take a look at the mechanics behind this super predictable cycle.
The whole thing gets triggered automatically every time 210,000 new blocks are created. Now that number might seem a little random, but since a new block gets added roughly every 10 minutes, it all works out to happen about once every 4 years. And what's really important is that no person, no company, no government can change this schedule. It is locked into the code.
To make this a little more real, let's just look at the numbers. So before the most recent halving, back in April of 2024, miners were earning a reward of 6.25 new Bitcoin for every single block they successfully added to the network.
Then, the second that 210,000th block was mined, boom, the halving kicked in, just like that. The reward was instantly chopped in half, dropping down to just 3.125 Bitcoin per block. And that right there is the halving in action.
Now, if we zoom out a bit, you can see this incredible long-term pattern taking shape. You had the halvings in 2020 and 2024, the next one's already on the calendar for 2028. And this whole process is just going to keep repeating, with the reward getting smaller and smaller until it basically hits zero somewhere around the year 2140.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the how, but you're probably asking, why does any of this even matter? Well, this gets to the absolute heart of Bitcoin's entire value proposition. You can think of the halving as a built-in scarcity engine. See, by systematically slowing down how many new coins get created, the halving makes sure that Bitcoin's inflation rate goes down on a completely predictable schedule. Every 4 years, new Bitcoin just get a little bit scarcer. And that's a really powerful and, frankly, unique economic feature. This predictable, code-enforced scarcity is the exact reason so many people call Bitcoin digital gold. Right? Just like real gold, which is hard to find and expensive to pull out of the ground, Bitcoin's supply is strictly limited by its programming.
It all points to this one magic number, 21 million. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin created, period. The halving is the very mechanism that guarantees we slowly approach that hard cap over the next 100 years or so.
Of course, anytime you talk about a sudden shock to supply, you've got to talk about the market. So how does this pre-programmed event affect Bitcoin's famous or maybe infamous price cycles? Well, it really boils down to Econ 101, supply and demand. The halving guarantees a cut in the new supply. So, what do you think tends to happen when that shrinking supply runs into steady or even rising demand from the market?
Historically, that combination, less new supply, same or more demand, has often come right before some major price uptrends. Now, of course, it is super important to remember that what happened in the past doesn't guarantee what will happen in the future. But this predictable supply shock is exactly why the halving is such a huge deal for investors every 4 years.
All right, finally, let's talk about the end game. What happens 100 years from now when these block rewards get really close to zero? How is the network going to keep paying miners to do their job and keep everything secure? Well, believe it or not, this was all part of the original plan.
So, as we've seen, that block reward is designed to just fade away. You can almost think of it as a temporary subsidy, a payment of new coins to help get the network off the ground and keep it secure in its first few decades.
The long-term plan, and this has been baked into Bitcoin's code from day one, is for the whole incentive structure to shift. So instead of getting paid with newly created Bitcoin, miners' income will eventually switch over to rely almost entirely on transaction fees, those small payments that users include to get their transactions processed.
And this whole transition from rewards to fees isn't an accident. It's a very deliberate design choice. It's meant to create a sustainable security budget, making sure that miners always have a reason to protect the network, even long after the very last new Bitcoin is mined around the year 2140.
Which, of course, leaves us with the ultimate cliffhanger for the future of the network. Once that reward subsidy is totally gone, will transaction fees, all on their own, be enough to secure a global financial network forever? Well, that is the multi-trillion-dollar question at the very center of Bitcoin's long-term experiment.